You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me as always I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, how are you doing, buddy?
Hey, doing pretty well. Just kind of had a little bit of an annoyance trying to get on the internet with all the new people moving into the apartment complex. I live in student and employee housing, so they cut me off. So, yeah, a little flustered getting into here, but doing pretty well. Just got my workout in for the day and ready to talk some football.
Man, those college students, they ruin everything.
They really do. However, they're better than high school students. So, and I was a graduate student now, so it's whatever. Although I don't want to sound like a damn boomer, you know. Like, oh, those darn kids. No.
Oh man, I miss College Town. I'll be honest.
I'll miss it when we move, especially with football right around the corner. You can just smell it.
I know. This weekend, right? College football's back?
Yeah, not for the Hawks, but we have, I think, does BYU play Hawaii? I think BYU plays somebody, and we get to see Hawaii, who has an underrated quarterback prospect in Cole McDonald. And the big game is Miami, Florida, so I'm excited for that. Unfortunately, I think they're on the same time as the Broncos. So, that's an easy choice.
Those jerks.
I know, and like none of the starters are going to play, so what are you going to do?
All right, well, at least football's back.
No complaints.
But because of that, we want to make sure that you can follow us on Twitter so you can get your football updates. You can find me at Carl Dumler MHH and, of course, at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, a new affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media.
Fantasy football fans, listen up. Do you want to join the biggest NFL season-long tournament ever? Of course you do. If you love fantasy football, and we know that you do, then you need to enter the $3.5 million Best Ball Championship on draft. You heard me right. $3.5 million in real money. Freaking huge. It's a season-long tournament, but with no management on your end. Just set it and forget it. Once you're done drafting, that's it. No trades, no waiver wire, none of that. You don't even have to set your lineup. Your best players get automatically started, and you'll get the best score every week, guaranteed. For a limited time only, you can get a free entry into the Best Ball Championship when you make your first deposit, but you have to use my promo code HUDDLE. That's right, a free shot at $1 million just by using my promo code HUDDLE when you make your first deposit on Draft. Just search Draft in the App Store or go to draft.com and come play for free. And don't forget to use that promo code HUDDLE.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, Carl. Well, like I hinted at a little bit ago, it does sound like the Broncos are not going to be playing their starters for the most part in this game. And I definitely feel solid about that because injuries happen. The Broncos had the extra preseason game, etc. But I wanted to pose with you, obviously, the Scouts I previewed today. And with so little starters playing, we're not going to really dive into the Rams depth chart. Like, Gurley's probably not going to play, Donald's not going to play, Goff's not going to play, Talib, Marcus Peters, etc., etc. So we don't really want to dive too deep on the Rams' third and fourth stringers when those guys are going to be, working at Enterprise in a week or 2 weeks. But I got to ask you, do you think the Broncos starters should play? And if so, why or why not?
Well, I want to say two things real quick. Just because I looked it up here real quick. It's Hawaii versus Arizona.
Oh, okay. There you go. Does BYU play?
No, not on this Thursday, or not on Saturday.
Okay. All right.
They're usually one of the early ones. They play on Thursday of next week.
Okay. Who do they play? Is it Utah State?
Utah.
Oh, that's a pretty good game. I know.
Yeah.
I think that's called the Holy War.
Is it? That would make sense.
Pretty good game, yeah. I bet you Chad will be involved in that one.
And I just want to say, I'm surprised Hawaii's not a better football team. Because if I'm a college kid, or getting ready to be a college kid, we're better to go for a full ride scholarship than Hawaii for 4 years.
The thing is with Hawaii, because the cost of getting people in and out, the only way you're allowed to visit the program is if you committed. So they're not bringing in guys for campus visits and whatnot unless they've already committed. So It makes it just a really unique program in that regard. Also,
well, I would still be signing up, man.
Yeah.
I'd just be like, it's Hawaii. How bad could it be?
Yeah, I guess you're not trying to make the NFL then. Right, like how many scouts are going there? How many eyes are on you when you're playing at Hawaii?
Well, if they were a good football team, there'd be a lot of people there.
True. I just feel like, you have those guys, especially the regional scouts, it just would be such a financial burden. And I guess they'd just go see you when you play like Fresno State or something. Or
Right.
UNLV.
Right. No, I'm just thinking 4 years free ride, Hawaii, that's not a bad deal.
No,
But that's just me. But back to actual football with the Broncos. I'm glad they're not playing the starters. I mean, the Broncos have already had enough players go down. I think they had 13 players sit out today. They had a couple others that they had to stick on injured reserve. It's just they're beat up right now. And there's no reason to get beat up in preseason and then have that many players still out when you actually get to the regular season when you actually need them. So the starters, you know what they are. They played quite a bit already. I mean, they've had extra practices. I don't know. They've just done so many things already. It doesn't, even though this is that third preseason, it's supposed to be that true warm up. This is really their fourth game. I don't see the purpose when you weigh the negatives against it, at least.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think defense, the entirety of the starting defense, don't play him. And there's been more and more comments about how people would rather have an extra joint practice and get rid of the preseason games and, hey, make the joint practice available to the public or something, maybe have a team host one and go to one as well. I think that's probably a direction I'd be looking at if I was, involved in the CBA somehow. But I do think there's only one unit that I want out there, and that's the offensive line. I feel like that's a unit, especially coming off against that game against the 49ers, where overall that first team unit was pretty hit or miss. And that's without Buckner, Bosa, or Ford playing, which is a yikes because those are their best three players, arguably, on their defensive line. Solomon Thomas, third overall pick, he had a really good game against the Broncos there, but I don't think they had a great game. And that's a unit, since talking about the collective bargaining agreement, there's way less padded practices than there have been before, and it takes offensive lines longer to gel than normal. So I think, honest to God, I would risk injury there, knock on wood, but I would risk injury there and put the offensive line out there, even if it's just for, 2 series, just to get that extra work in, padded practice, so that way they can work on gelling and give them a chance to rebound off of a pretty hit or miss performance against the 49ers. But other than that, obviously no vets, nobody like that, and maybe even don't play James. Maybe just do exactly what you did with the Hall of Fame game where you played Bowles, Reisner, and McGovern, just to kind of have that solidifying factor there on that left side of the line. But I think if there's any unit that I can argue should be getting reps together and take advantage of these practice reps, it's got to be the offensive line. I would like to see them play.
Well, let me ask you this. Since they did start this at practice this week, Wilkinson at right guard. Would you want all 5 to start just so James could get used to the idea of Wilkinson being next to him? Because right now, I would say red alert on Leary and whether he's actually going to be ready for the season.
Are you weary on Leary?
I am. I'm very weary on Leary.
Thank you for laughing.
It took me a second. I'm like, wait a minute, that rhymed.
That rhymed. No, that hopefully it didn't ram.
But no, I just, if they are worried about him being ready, to me, then it's worth having those 5 out there just so they can actually get a few game reps playing together. Because, it's just one of those, I think they're planning on Leary obviously being healthy. He's not. So now they're kind of at that, what do we do? Do you play your 6th best offensive lineman, Wilkinson, who can play guard or tackle, who played right guard last year? Or do you keep with, I think it was Schlottman?
Schlottman in the game against the 49ers and Barclay in the game against the Seahawks.
Right. So do you stick with those guys and just say, hey, you've been practicing here all year. We're going to keep you there. I don't know. If you are really planning on Wilkinson being the starter there, if you know that Leary's not going to be ready, then to me, get those five some reps together, because that communication and zone blocking scheme, it's not always about being the exact best athletes. It's not about being the strongest guy, the biggest guy, or anything like that. It really boils down to that communication and ability to work together. And when you have that weak link of a guy that just doesn't know what he's doing because he hasn't practiced there, that's a pretty big deal. So I just, for me, that would be one that I'd like to see out there. The other starter that I wouldn't mind seeing get some more reps, just because it did look like he was very rusty this past game, Josey Jewell.
Yep.
I really wouldn't mind seeing him get out there just to knock some more rust off there, just get ready for the season. Like you said, couple series. It doesn't have to be a ton out there. I mean, you don't want to go crazy, but just that little bit more action, just getting more into that game mode. A lot of it has to deal with just the getting ready for a game.
Yeah.
I mean, just getting your mindset into, okay, I'm getting ready to go play in a game. I think sometimes that takes a little bit of time to really get back into it for a player. So, yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing Josey Jewell. Other starters, I can't think of any others that really jump out at me. I mean, you don't need your running backs out there.
Absolutely not, yeah.
Wide receiver-wise, I think they know what they've got. You really don't want to play Sanders for sure.
And I don't think I want to play Sutton or Hamilton either.
I don't either. I mean, because the wide receiver depth, if any of those three go down, it gets pretty bleak pretty quick. And safety depth, I'm good there. Cornerback depth, I'm pretty good there. I mean, do you play Bosby and Yadam?
That I was going to ask you. Do you play? I would play Bosby. I would honestly probably play Bosby and Yadam.
Yeah, I mean, they need some more reps. They're still young players. I don't think that would be the worst thing for them. But again, 2 series, get them out of there. I don't think they need much more than that.
Yep. Nope. I am total agreement with you there. So I guess, again, this is Scout's Eye Preview. Typically, we're going to talk about the opposing team, but the Rams aren't really in to playing starters in the preseason, which, I mean, can you blame them? So instead, I'm going to some main takeaways going forward from the San Francisco game, as it relates to concerns, things we're excited about of this Bronco team going forward in the regular season. And for me, one thing that I did an article about it, and Chad gave me a little bit of a hard time, because it's kind of a niche market doing a huge article on it. But ever since then, I feel like it's been a very hotly contested topic. And Vic Fangio's even one, he's been complaining about it a lot. And that special teams, man, they have not looked good, and it's not even like, I don't care. It would be awesome if they had a dynamic returner. Sure, that'd be great. But it's the coverage units and the blocking for the kickoff and punt returners, right? It's just been super undisciplined, not great tackling, to the point where Fangio's like, yeah, we might get some starters out there. He played Bowman at special teams when he was in San Francisco, so he's really not happy with those guys. And, some people will kind of be like, well, a lot of these guys aren't going to be making the team. Yeah, but they're still not playing disciplined, and if Fangio is sounding the alarm there and worry, then I feel a little bit justified to be worried that the special teams, not the kicker, I think McManus is fine. Wadman had a better game, although at altitude, so worth monitoring going forward. But really just the coverage and those guys, the linebackers, tight ends, wide receivers, running backs out there making the tackles and the blocking have been really not good. And typically in a game, in an NFL game, or football game in general, you need to win 2 of the 3 phases to win the game. And if you're automatically losing special teams every week, you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball. So special teams been pretty bad every preseason game so far, and it's definitely, I'm DEFCON 3.
Well, I think of, a lot of people are saying, well, yeah, it's these second, third string kind of guys. But there's still guys out there that are going to make this team. I think of Tim Patrick. I've seen him on a few times where he is there to make the play, but he doesn't break down to make the tackle. He's just coming in full speed, no slow down, and usually he's kind of that outside guy, and his job is really to push that returner back inside. So when he runs past the returner, all he's done is open up that complete side of the field. And I think I've seen about 3 or 4 returns where that happened, where he's running so fast, he wants to go make such a big play, and I appreciate that. But you still have to, like you said, discipline. Really, special teams comes down to want to and discipline. You got those 2 things. You don't have to be the most athletic. You don't have to be the best player out there. Those things really pay off. And so right now, like I said, there's going to be players that make this team that still haven't shown well in an area that they need to show well. And It could lead to the Broncos bringing in extra guys after the cut down day from 90 to 53 and saying, well, our guys aren't making it. Our guys aren't doing their job. Let's go look on other rosters. It would not surprise me to see the Broncos bring in 2-3 extra guys from somebody else's roster. It also wouldn't surprise me to see there be maybe a couple unexpected cuts because you need that special teams help. And if there's a guy that's standing out on special teams, you're going to sit there and say, well, he deserves a roster spot more than this guy that maybe could help our offense or defense more, but isn't going to do anything for us on special teams and is a backup.
Yeah.
So it is. It's a big deal when you really think about it. And in the NFL, the old saying is you got to win 2 of the 3 areas of offense, defense, special teams. Well, if you're losing special teams every week, that means you got to be spot on with your offense, spot on with your defense. I don't have any worry about the defense too much, but offensively, do you really trust that the Broncos are going to go out there week in and week out, win with the offense to cover up enough of the special teams? I don't. And I think there was it the Chargers that were first in offense, first in defense, and total yards given up, and still didn't make the playoffs?
Yes, I believe so.
Their special teams were that bad. So it's definitely something to monitor for the Broncos, and something, I mean, it does show a little bit of their depth issue. And that's kind of my first big takeaway that I have is just a little bit of I do think for the most part, starters wise, the Broncos will be very competitive this year. I just don't know if I view them as one of those giants of the NFL right now. And I'm not talking about the New York Giants football team. I'm talking like one of the top teams where they're getting talked about for that Super Bowl contender. I mean, the Chiefs, the Chargers are getting some of that talk. You always have the Patriots, of course. The Saints are getting that talk. Eagles. I mean, we could go down the list of teams that look like they're going to be very competitive this year. And so for me, I guess from what I've seen so far, it does look like a little bit of a transition year. That doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. The Broncos have been bad for a while. It was going to take a transition year to really get things going. And it just seems like they've started working to get the right pieces in place. It's just not going to be bring in the coach and all of a sudden the Broncos are Super Bowl contenders this year.
Yep. No, I agree with you there. All right. Well, any takeaways as it perceives to what you saw in the San Francisco game going forward?
Well, I would say Emmanuel Sanders just showed once again how important he is to this team. I mean, the man was the offense there in that game against the 49ers. And so I'm glad that he's back. I'm glad he returned quicker than people thought, because I don't know what this offense would be without him.
Yeah, no, he is the most dynamic pass catcher on this offense, and they really need him so badly, like incredibly badly. It was awesome to see how much they utilized him as well, you know, in the pass game, deep pass, end around, screen. So that was great. So I definitely agree with you there. Another one for me, I think a big takeaway here is that, and I even have a quote here from Fangio as far as it relates to this topic. So he said today, I've never game planned for a preseason game in my life, and I never will. We just go out there and play kind of basic football so we can evaluate the guys, because you never know who they've got in there either. So, you know, watching last week, seeing the Broncos continuously run the ball against 8-man boxes, folks, I don't think that's happening in the regular season. So I'm guessing we'll see some adjustment out there from, you know, audibles, different personnel out there. If teams are going to absolutely take away the run, then spread them out. And I think Flacco is more than competent to take advantage. If you're playing 8-man boxes and you got one-on-ones outside, I think he can take advantage of that. So that's something, that's a takeaway for me. I'm expecting to see these adjustments way more in the regular season than we've seen in preseason.
I saw a quote from one of the media people. They were asking about Scangarello and whether he's the real deal or not. And they said from inside the building, somebody was telling them that it's either he has completely faked us all out that he is this good, or he will actually be this good for us. And so I think within the Broncos organization, they really feel good about Scangarello as an offensive coordinator. And like I said, in the preseason, you're going to call things differently than you would in the regular season. I mean, Fangio himself has said, we're going to put guys even in disadvantaged situations because we want to see how they handle it.
Yeah.
So just always keep that in mind when you're complaining about the play calling when it comes to the game. Yes, I mean, it is frustrating. I mean, right now, the red zone offense, of course, that's going to be frustrating to watch. The Broncos with that starting offense hasn't punched it in. They ran some fade patterns that just, how often does the fade work? Not enough to really justify using it that much. And I don't expect that in the actual regular season you're going to see that as much as we've seen it in the preseason.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. And I guess that's going to wrap up this first segment for us. Carl, I know you have a meeting to get to, so we'll keep moving along. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back, folks.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos. I am I am Nick. Carl, sometimes I wish I was you. You're a pretty good guy.
Oh,
no, I am Nick along with Carl, and we're going to do some key Broncos to watch in this game. So the big guy for me, I was a big fan of him coming out. I thought he could be a unique weapon, and with the more passing game going forward, I think his talent could be utilized. And yeah, I mean, he was in the 2012 draft, so he's definitely a senior to this league at this point. But Orson Charles out of Georgia, 6'2", about 265. He's a big sucker. Doesn't really have that tight end length that you see from those guys these days, but also really hasn't been that dominant fullback kind of blocker as well. That was a weakness of his coming out. Didn't do as well as his pro day, showing the athleticism that people thought he'd have. He's bounced around Cincinnati, Cleveland, but I think this is an offense that could really utilize him. I mean, obviously, Janovich is a really good blocker, but I think Orson Charles has more upside as a receiver. And the trend these past few years is when you go into, is it 12 personnel? 21. I always get those two mixed up. I'm number dyslexic, I swear. Fullback and running back out there. Then you see teams really go into base package, and that's when they're the most vulnerable to the pass. That's why we see a guy like Kyle Juszczyk really utilizing the pass game. So I'm interested to see Orson Charles. I hope he does well. I think this is an offense that he could be utilized in. Odds are he's a guy who probably doesn't latch on, but I don't know. I'm intrigued, and I think he is a guy that will definitely see some usage out of this week because they need to evaluate what he has with these 2 games left. So Orson Charles, the pickup yesterday, good call by Eric as well, writing a piece saying, hey, this is a guy that Broncos might look at because, hey, they have injuries at fullback, they have injuries at tight end, and George Aston has not performed in special teams like they'd hoped. So bringing in Orson Charles, I think that's a great get for them.
The way to remember how they set that up with 21 personnel or whatever, running backs first, tight end second. So 2 running backs, 1 tight end.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I just always 21 and 12 is just like, ugh, which one is which?
Right. So 1 running back, 12, 2 tight ends. Yeah, I know. I get that way sometimes, trying to remember when people start talking about those things. Okay, what does that mean again? But
I have a gripe real quick, a number dyslexic thing. Why in God's green earth are the numbers different on calculators than phones? Did you ever notice that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's backwards. It's
really messes
upside down
me up.
and backwards. Yeah.
Yep. I can't do it. I swear I've probably messed up answers on math tests because I've done that wrong. So continue. That's one of my pet peeves in life. Yeah.
No,
what
I understand.
the hell?
I know. It's kind of like the whole hot dogs come in packs of 10, but buns come in packs of 8.
Okay.
Makes zero sense.
I hate that as well.
I know it's a way of getting money, but anyway. So my first guy, just because we already talked about him just a quick second there, but Colby Wadman. I mean, you look at was it the Patriots just cut their big time punter?
Yes, Brian Allen.
Yeah, and so right now, I mean, the Broncos, at least 2 games ago, they weren't very happy with Wadman. This past game was better, but it still wasn't great by any means. I mean, he was very inconsistent. His hang time was all over the place. He had 2 touchbacks, which, I mean, that's 10, 20, 30 yards of field position that you're sacrificing just by not having a great punter out there. And those yards add up very, very quickly. So right now, I mean, I think he's fighting for his life here. I mean, I was kind of surprised the Broncos let the other punter go that they had brought in. I mean, maybe he's showing it in practice better than he's showing in the games, but right now, I mean, games matter, and he's not been what the Broncos need.
Well, I'm with you there. I don't know if they have the cash to bring in a guy that will be paid as much as Brian Allen. I think they shot their load as far as cap flexibility when they signed Theo Riddick, because they did not have much going into the season, unless they want to give up a lot of long-term flexibility, maybe working out at an extension with Wolf or renegotiating Flacco's deal. But I don't think they want to do that. I mean, they already have, what is it, like $21 million in dead cap? Something pretty high. They're actually pretty high up there in dead cap. So I don't think they want to give up that flexibility. So we'll see. A big one for me this week, and I'm really excited to watch. And he had an up-and-down game last week at left tackle, but Elijah Wilkinson, whether it's with the starting unit at right guard or playing left tackle or right tackle, he's a guy that, I mean, let's be completely honest, the Broncos need to step up. You know, it's becoming, like we talked about, more and more apparent that Leary might not be ready week 1. I mean, who knows how long it could take, and the inconsistencies and the rumors surrounding Garrett Bowles and his, let's just call them issues, you know, that's we really need Wilkinson to step up. The Broncos need Wilkinson to step up. He's got to play a little better than last week, and he is going to have less flashes and upside than Bowles, but the great offensive linemen don't have to be they don't have to be great. You know, like, who was it? Cam Robinson was the second overall pick a few years ago, has dominating, I mean, this was probably like almost over 10 years ago now, but they have, not Cam Robinson, who was the one? Greg Robinson, from Auburn, second overall. And, you know, big flashes in the run game, whatnot, but just not consistent. Great offensive linemen are consistently even and good, and you just don't see that from Bowles, and I think you have that potentially with Wilkinson. So really interested to see Wilkinson this week. And, you know, Scangarello singled him out earlier in camp, saying he's a guy who's impressed him and heavy hands. So who knows? But I think he's got a chance to be at worst the Billy Turner in this offensive line group this year. But, you know, he could push Bowles, he could fill in for James, and he could take Leary's spot. So definitely interesting to see Elijah Wilkinson.
Right. He's got definitely a few avenues to starting on this team this year. And so I'm so disappointed this last week. We talked about it, I think, on our last show a little bit, of Bowles has a really rough game, and you're kind of going, okay, Wilkinson, this is your real big chance to go make the coaches at least have a conversation. And then he goes out there and has it wasn't as rough when I went back and watched it again, but it was still rough. I mean, there was still a lot of mistakes, and you got to think his talent level that he was going against was less than what Bowles was going against, and he still struggled some. So definitely a big game for him again this week, especially if they decide to play Bowles a little bit and just see what he does and if he can bounce back from such a bad game or not. But my next guy is Kelvin McKnight. This is one guy I don't know, just in the back of my mind, I keep thinking this guy might do something. I think he's got a little bit of juice to him. He's got that ability to play in the slot for the Broncos if they need him at wide receiver. I mean, he made a couple nice catches in this last game. And they're looking for one guy to emerge as a returner. I mean, River Craycraft is the consistent guy. He's going to go back there, catch it, maybe run 7 yards straight forward. Maybe. Kelvin McKnight's maybe that guy. I just think if he can have that one big play on special teams, he's really going to make the coaches go, yep, let's do it. Let's just keep this guy. Let's see what he can do.
Yep, he's definitely one I'm interested in as well. He had some flashes. So, you know, look out. The Broncos might keep 6 wide receivers. He's a guy to watch. For me, this is a question mark because we talked about it a little bit here. He might not play, but Josie Jewell. I thought he was solid in coverage last week. You know, not great, not bad, but really his calling card was the run support and the instincts he had coming in. And in that game, he did not show it. I mean, that first run, that was 75% on Jewell. You know, he read it wrong. There was some of that pre-snap motion. He got suckered in and it created a lane. You know, he did not play disciplined, read it wrong. So Josie Jewell got to step up and play better this year. And, you know, a lot of people like to harp on Todd Davis, but I don't think it's close. I think Todd Davis is obviously the better player right now. And he's better at what Jewell is supposedly good at, you know. Jewell, the instinctual guy, you know, a lot of wrong reads, biting hard on play action last year, and struggled getting off blocks. So he's got to beat guys there and be smarter than them and process at a high level if he's going to win in between the tackles at this level. And you know, he's coming off the oblique injury, absolutely. But we're talking about last year as well, so need to see him continue on. And I'm glad you brought him up. talking about should the starters play, because he's one that I think he should play because he needs the reps. He needs to go out there and prove that, the up and down last week, especially in the run game, was a fluke and he can improve on it. So, but that being said, I do think he is a better fit in the scheme as far as the coverage goes, because his zone ability and the underrated agility that he possesses is good there. But again, he's got to be able to play the run better than he has, especially with the Broncos sporting a lighter defensive line than they have in years past.
Well, I think his worst play was actually on the interception by Yadam. I mean, you really think about if the pressure wasn't there, if you go back and watch that, he took a terrible angle for pass coverage. He was going against, what's their running back's name?
Was it Bredia or Coleman? No?
I can't remember. I guess they're all fast.
Yeah, they're all fast.
I think it was Breida.
Breida? I can't
I think
his name, so.
Yeah, I think that's who it was. And he ran, I think it was a 4.35 coming out of college as a running back. So one of the fastest running backs in football. And he took this angle straight at him. And of course, Breida's running a deep route. That was I think it was supposed to be a rub route is what it was looking like with the wide receiver. And if that pressure is not there, I think that's a touchdown for the 49ers. And so he got kind of bailed out on that play. I know it looks great for the Broncos. It's an interception, turnover, all of that for him. And of course, Bradley Chubb looked great. But man, you just can't do that. He's got to understand the competition of who he's going against and take better angles than that to not give up those big plays. But like I said, I mean, I think just getting some of that rust off of him. But right now, I mean, you think about it also, the other big thing is they said they're not sure if Todd Davis is going to be ready for week 1. So Josie Jewell is your number 1 off-ball linebacker possibly to start the season. And they need him to be something. You can't have both of those positions being downright terrible. So definitely a big deal. My final guy had a really rough game. Troy Fumagalli. I had not high hopes, but decent hopes for him this year that he'd at least be a nice depth guy for the Broncos at the tight end position. But he just, blocking wise, he was not great. He didn't do anything in the receiving game. Just nothing about his game made me go, yep, this guy really deserves a roster spot right now. He missed on 2 big time blocks. There was one with, I mean, yes, he was supposed to help Bowles on that one holding play. He didn't do his little rub on the defender. And then there was another on the screen pass where both him and Bowles both ran by the same guy. Neither of them picked him up. And then that guy ends up with a tackle for loss. And so just definitely needs a big game to come back. I mean, because tight end, it's just with everybody getting injured, it sounds like Hireman's down for a while. I don't know what all is going on with him. Fant, I'm not sure what his prognosis is of when. I think he'll be ready for the season. I don't think it's anything big, but still, it's another guy that's banged up. But who knows when he's actually going to be ready for the field. So Troy Fumagalli could, here early in the season, be a guy that they need to lean on. And right now, I don't think I would trust him on the field.
Nope. If you recall my scouting report when that came out, a lot of people talked about him as, he went to Wisconsin, so he's a really good blocker. I didn't see that in the tape. Kind of top heavy. I didn't actually like his proportions. Didn't really do well there. I thought the Wisconsin offensive line was much better, and obviously you're going to ask to be blocked at Wisconsin, but I didn't really love him there. They split him out a fair amount, and I also thought he wasn't really dynamic in space. He's a solid guy, but much better as a tight end 3 than you want being a tight end 1 or 2. So, yeah, that needs to do a little better, for sure. So, all right, well, one more break because we got to get Carl out of here. We will be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. Typically, like I've said, we're going to spend more time looking at the opposing team, but man, the Rams really are not playing their starters, and looking over their team, they also don't have very good depth. I mean, I think they're a team that has really gone for their window. You got the rookie contract quarterback, you got Aaron Donald in his prime, and you got the running back who's still quote unquote in his prime. So they've traded away assets, they've given up stuff in order to go make their run this year. I mean, they made the Super Bowl last year, they were close, but the depth has suffered a bit. And looking at them, I mean, we're going to get a chance to go against Blake Bortles probably Saturday, and they have some talent at running back. I did like John Kelly out of Tennessee coming out. Darrell Henderson, they spent a pretty good draft pick on. Josh Reynolds, another guy that I really like coming out from Texas A&M, who filled in for Cooper Kupp last year. Not a slot guy, but still the third wide receiver because they like to use so much 11 personnel. And the offensive line for them, not great. So definitely the Broncos will get a chance to go after them. David Edwards from Wisconsin, talking about Wisconsin, and Bobby Evans from Oklahoma. So two guys to watch there on the offensive line. Defensively, again, this is a team that's really, really very much about the starters. But you got Greg Gaines from Washington, nose tackle there. Tanzel Smart from Tulane, and then the linebacker group, not great. A lot of young guys. The guy who stands out there for the linebacker group for me, who's been playing decent for them in the preseason, is Ogbania Okoronkwo, the kind of diminutive edge rusher from Oklahoma. He's done well there. And then looking at the secondary, you got Troy Hill, Dominique Hartfield, and Nick Scott and Taylor Rapp. So Taylor Rapp, another Washington guy that they took. So really, it's not the starters are great. But if everybody's been complaining about the Broncos' depth, and rightfully so, they have been great. But I think this is a game that the Broncos will have a chance to win, just because the Rams are another team that are, on paper and seeing their preseason games, not great in the depth department as well.
I think there's two ways that you get a terrible record in the preseason. Either you have the most outright bad depth when your second and third string units are coming in, or your coaches are just actually trying to not play to lose, but actually put players in bad situations.
I'll give you a third one.
What's that?
If your quarterback is absolute dog shit, then it's hard to do anything.
Right. That makes sense.
Like specifically the quarterback, because you can't run anything else then.
Right.
It doesn't matter how good your wide receivers are if you have Tim Tebow throwing them the damn ball.
Right.
So go ahead.
No, you're right. But I just think of like the Rams. You were talking. I mean, they're 0-2 in the preseason right now and have looked terrible in both games.
Yeah.
And it really does boil down to their depth is just not that great. So it's kind of a weakness on weakness here in this game. And sometimes you try to look for those players that maybe if cut down day comes and they're not, it's a position that they're strong at, and you're kind of looking at some players. So like for me that I'm kind of keeping an eye on is Simba Webster. And just he's intrigued me a little bit because he's got a little bit of juice to him. He's got they've worked him on special teams a little bit. It's not like he's done anything crazy, but he's been pretty consistent there. So he's just a guy I want to see a little bit more, just see if he can have a big game. And if he does, he might make their team. I mean, he's kind of in a battle with, I think it's Jojo Natson is the one that he's in the battle with for that special teams returner role. And whichever one loses, I mean, it's kind of one of those weird, if they lose, do you really want them on your team? But at the same time, I look at what the Broncos have and I go, there's absolutely nothing there. So definitely a guy that kind of has caught my eye a little bit, that I've heard little sprinkles that he's been making a name for himself there with the Rams.
All right.
So, like I said, just a guy that I'm going to keep an eye on. Nothing too crazy in this one.
For sure. All right, Carl. Well, we're going to cut it short today because, again, the internet problems. Getting into this, I know you have to get off to a meeting and you still have to send this to me so I can edit it. So that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos. This will be out the same day the Broncos play, Saturday. And this Building the Broncos is brought to you by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up Podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.